The year is 1815. The cannon fire from the War of 1812 has finally faded. Along the bustling docks of New York and Boston, a fleet of British ships drops anchor. But this time, they aren't carrying soldiers or artillery. They are loaded to the brim with wooden crates. Inside are clothes, iron tools, and everyday manufactured goods. And the prices are staggeringly low. Dirt cheap, they're being sold at or even below the cost it took to make them. For the exhausted citizens standing on the docks, this feels like a miracle, a long-awaited blessing of peace. They eagerly scoop up the bargains, thrilled by the sudden rush of affordable old-world luxuries. To the local farmers and shopkeepers, it looks like a victory. They believe they have survived the war and are finally reaping the rewards of a free and open market. But a few quiet men watching from a distance do not share this joy. They look down at the crowded, buzzing markets and feel a cold dread. They watch the citizens happily handing over their coins, completely unaware of the trap closing around them. To these detached observers, the cheap iron and woven wool are not a gift of peace, they are a weapon. Why would a flood of affordable products terrify a nation's brightest minds? What if this seemingly innocent trade was actually a calculated, silent invasion? A highly engineered strike designed to quietly strangle the spine of a newborn country, ensuring that even if it had won its political freedom, it would never truly learn to stand on its own.
Wow. Yeah. So let's jump right into this deep dive. Picture this. It's 1815, and a guy named Elias is standing on the Philadelphia docks. He's a clerk, right? And he's rubbing the soot off his ledger, just watching this massive British merchant ship, the Leviathan, unload crates and crates of Sheffield steel.
Which is, exactly what you were just describing.
Exactly. And all around him, the local taverns are full of these Jeffersonian pamphlets singing the praises of the noble soil-tilling yeoman. The idea that breathing the pure air of the Republic is everything.
Right, the whole agrarian ideal.
Yeah, but Elias's brother is a blacksmith. And his forge fire died a month ago. You can't eat pure air, So Elias is standing there feeling this bitter shame. He's literally stamping the import papers, facilitating the ruin of his own community. And he's thinking about this radical, highly contested report from the Treasury Secretary about protective tariffs and humming American mills. The radical report Elias was thinking of was Alexander Hamilton's 1791 report on manufacturing.
Yeah, that's the one. And the core tension here is wild. To the agrarian South, this report looked like straight-up government tyranny. But to struggling northern artisans, it was the only real path to independence.
What's fascinating here is the specific mechanics of Hamilton's 1791 proposal. Because he wasn't just throwing out ideas in a vacuum. He was aggressively rejecting the dominant economic doctrines of the time.
Like the French physiocrats.
The physiocratic doctrine basically claimed that agriculture was the singular, absolute source of wealth.
If it didn't come out of dirt, it didn't count.
That's literally it. They viewed manufacturing as well. They called artisans the sterile class. Like, a blacksmith isn't creating wealth. He's just reshaping the iron someone else's mind.
Which is just so insulting to Elias's brother.
Oh, incredibly insulting. But Hamilton was also taking aim at Adam Smith's laissez-faire ideas. The wealth of nations was huge back then.
Right, the invisible hand. Just let the market do its thing.
Yeah, but Hamilton completely rejected that for a developing country. He believed you needed government incitement and patronage to overcome the inertia of starting brand new industries.
Because the British had a huge head start, right?
Well, not just a head start. Hamilton pointed out that European empires gave their producers what he called artificial encouragements.
Wait, meaning subsidies?
The British government was actively subsidizing their factories. So, relying on Adam Smith's free market was a trap when your competitors are getting government handouts.
If Hamilton wrote this in 1791, why was Elias still watching his brother go out of business in 1815? Didn't Congress pass Hamilton's plan?
And that's a huge part of the story. There was fierce opposition from Thomas Jefferson and James Madison.
The ultimate agrarian team.
And their argument was primarily constitutional. They believed that federal bounties, direct subsidies to manufacturers, blatantly violated the limited enumerated powers of the government.
So they thought it was unconstitutional overreach.
They were terrified it would lead to corruption and just massive favoritism of the industrialized North over the agrarian South.
But didn't Hamilton actually propose pretty moderate tariffs? I remember Douglas Irwin's historical analysis pointing that out.
Yeah, that's the irony. Irwin points out that Hamilton only proposed moderate tariffs, around 7.5%. He wasn't pushing for massive protectionist walls.
Why so low, though, if he wanted to protect domestic industry?
Because Hamilton's main job as Treasury Secretary was to pay off the national debt. And to do that, he desperately needed import taxes. If tariffs were too high, it would encourage smuggling and...
Oh, and it would reduce the volume of imports coming in.
He needed that import volume to collect taxes. But even with those moderate proposals, Congress fought him tooth and nail. They totally rejected his direct bounties.
Right, the fisheries debate of 1792, this part is crazy.
Congress was debating a basic salt tax rebate for New England fishermen, and Madison's camp freaked out over the word bounty.
Because if you give a bounty to fish guys, what's next, right?
Right. It was a slippery slope. They literally had to cross out the word bounty and change it to allowance just to pass the bill.
That is some serious political gymnastics. So did Hamilton get any of his tariffs passed?
He did in May 1792, but only because the government suffered a military defeat by Western indigenous tribes and desperately needed emergency funds. It wasn't an ideological victory for manufacturing.
The historical irony with Jefferson and Madison is just, I mean, it's wild, because the manufacturers actually abandoned Hamilton's Federalists.
Yeah, they felt Hamilton's tariffs were way too low to actually help them.
Exactly. And so the guys who inadvertently forced the U.S. to build its domestic industries from scratch were Jefferson and Madison.
Yes, because of the foreign policy situation. You had Britain and France harassing American ships, so Jefferson and Madison pushed for these aggressive embargoes against Britain between 1807 and 1815.
They just completely shut down foreign trade.
Total embargo. And by doing that, they accidentally created an impenetrable wall against British goods. So suddenly, Americans had to make their own stuff.
They achieved Hamilton's exact goal, but through the policies of his biggest rivals.
But of course, once the War of 1812 ended and peace was declared, those infant industries were suddenly facing total destruction again. Which brings us right back to Elias on the docks.
Right, because the cheap British goods are flooding back in to drown the American competition. So the survival of American industry required someone to step up and build a formalized political platform.
And that brings us to the Capitol in 1824.
Yes, let's shift the scene there. Imagine Silas, this junior stenographer. The air in the chamber is thick with cigar smoke and damp wool. His hand is cramping up because Henry Clay's voice is just thundering through the room.
Ah, Henry Clay.
Yeah, and Clay is basically resurrecting Hamilton's doctrines and officially naming them the American system. And Silas looks over at the Southern delegates. Their faces are like carved stone, eyes burning with just paranoid fury.
Because they only see northern mills fattening on their southern agricultural exports.
Exactly, and Silas feels this paralyzing dread because he sees that the flawless logic of Clay's architecture, which is meant to bind the states together, is actually becoming the tightrope that will tear the republic apart.
So, what exactly was Henry Clay's American system? Sure. So it rested on three cardinal pillars. Number one, high protective tariffs. This was to shelter infant industries.
So unlike Hamilton's 7.5%, Clay wanted high walls.
The second pillar was a national bank. You needed to stabilize the crazy frontier currency and control land speculation.
So you need reliable money to do business. And the third pillar?
Federal investment in internal improvements. We're talking roads, canals, harbors, all funded by the tariffs to unite the country commercially.
Which is why Henry Clay was the great compromiser. He had this vision to weave the nation together, north to south, east to west. It deliberately countered the British system of Adam Smith.
Right. Adam Smith's system basically kept Britain as the world's only factory. Clay wanted America to be independent.
But obviously, the Jacksonian opposition wasn't having it.
Andrew Jackson, Martin Van Buren, James K. Polk, they led this massive ideological war against Clay.
And their whole thing was majoritarian philosophy, right? Like the majority governs.
Exactly. They looked at the Second Bank of the United States and the high tariffs, and they saw them as serving special moneyed interests.
Not the common people.
They thought it was corrupt.
So if Jackson was so opposed to this, how did he dismantle it?
He was ruthless about it. It was called the Bank War. Despite all the maneuvers from Bank President Nicholas Biddle and Henry Clay, Jackson outright vetoed the recharter of the national debt.
Which killed it.
Dead. He vetoed internal improvements, too, like the Maysville Road project in Kentucky. He argued on strict constitutional constructionist grounds that federal money couldn't fund local projects.
And this connects directly to the physical threat to the Union. I mean, we have to talk about the Tariff of Abominations in 1828.
The economic policies were driving a wedge right through the country. The tariffs disproportionately injured the South.
Because they were import dependent and relying on cotton exports.
Exactly. And this economic pain sparked the nullification crisis. South Carolina literally threatened secession over it.
Just over the tariffs.
Yeah. And Clay had to step in with the compromise tariff of 1833 to gradually lower rates and barely avoid a civil war.
Temporarily avoiding it anyway, because obviously Clay's Whig Party eventually collapsed, and the American system lay dormant under Democratic administrations. But that fundamental tension Silas saw in 1824, it eventually exploded into the Civil War. And in that crisis, the American system was resurrected by a former Whig, Abraham Lincoln. Which takes us to Thomas. He's a surveyor for a new rail line in the Ohio Valley after the war.
Oh, the Gilded Age engine.
Imagine the mud clinging to his boots. It smells like rust and displaced earth. 1,000 immigrant laborers are driving steel spikes into the wilderness. It's this brutal, deafening symphony of the Gilded Age, completely subsidized by government intervention.
The same intervention the agrarians hated.
And Thomas looks at the telegraph wires and realizes Hamilton's ghost is right there in the grease, the smoke, and the explosive productivity. The grand ledger of national progress is being written in sweat, bone, and this terrifying momentum.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the secession of the southern states in 1861 actually allowed the old Whig coalition, who are now the Republicans, to completely control the government.
Because the opposition literally left to form the Confederacy.
So Lincoln took immediate action. He tripled the average tariff. He subsidized the Transcontinental Railroad with the Pacific Railway Act.
And he also issued fiat paper money, the greenbacks, through the Legal Tender Act. Just to clarify for you listening, fiat money just means it's money because the government says it is. It's not backed by gold.
And they did this to fund the war and develop the economy completely independent of British gold.
Which brings in Henry C. Carey, Lincoln's economic advisor. Carey promoted this idea called the harmony of interests.
Which is such a sharp contrast to Karl Marx's class struggle, which was picking up steam at the same time.
Yeah. Marx is saying labor and management are enemies, but Carey believed the American system elevated the producer. He thought tariffs and infrastructure created harmony between labor and management and between agriculture and manufacturing.
It's a completely different worldview. And this leads right into the economic categorizations made by historian Michael Lind.
About the republics, right?
Yeah, Lind talks about the Second Republic, which is the Civil War and Reconstruction era, leading directly into the Gilded Age from 1870 to 1900.
Driven by steam, electricity, and the internal combustion engine.
The Second Industrial Revolution.
And the data from this Gilded Age economic boom is staggering. Under decades of the protective system, real wages increased by 53%, while prices fell by 58%.
Which is wild to think about. How do prices fall when wages are rising so much?
It was economies of scale. The protected domestic market let them build massive, efficient factories. And I love this quote from President William McKinley defending the system. He said, "Free trade cheapens the product by cheapening the producer. Protection cheapens the product by elevating the producer."
That really sums up their entire philosophy.
So what does this all mean for the 20th century? Because obviously we shifted away from this. Starting with Woodrow Wilson in 1913, we see a shift away from the American system. He lowered tariffs and created the Federal Reserve.
Though there was a brief return to tariffs under Harding and Hoover with the Smoot-Hawley tariff.
True, but then the massive disruption of the Great Depression hits.
And that ushers in the Third Republic under Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal.
How did the New Deal treat the American system?
Well, FDR continued the focus on infrastructure, like with the WPA and TVA, and he kept industrial subsidies. But he abandoned extreme protective tariffs. Yeah, he favored moderate reciprocity instead of giant tariff walls.
And that leads into the Golden Age, from 1945 to 1970. This 25-year window of unprecedented prosperity, real GDP increased by 169%. Per capita income doubled.
It was a unique historical synthesis. You had Hamiltonian industrial policy mixed with Keynesian demand management.
Plus, let's be real, the U.S. maintained this dominance largely because its industrial competitors had been literally wiped out in World War II.
But the American system didn't just stay in America. And this is where we have to talk about Friedrich List.
Oh, the 19th century economist.
He studied the American system firsthand and then developed it into the national system.
Wait, if it was designed specifically to make America independent from Europe, how did it end up being used by the rest of the world?
Because List's theories became the absolute blueprint for global developmental economics. He argued that the basic unit of the world economy isn't the individual firm, it's the political seat collaborating with the private sector to maximize security and modernize technology.
That makes total sense. The state is the engine.
And Japan adopted this during the Meiji Restoration. It heavily influenced Deng Xiaoping's post-Mao policies in China. You even see it in recent economic policies in India.
It's wild that Hamilton's playbook was used by other nations to catch up. But meanwhile, back in the US, we see the definitive end of the American school's dominance in 1973.
Yeah, the conclusion of the Kennedy round under Richard Nixon. The U.S. cut tariffs to all-time lows and fully embraced free trade globalism.
Effectively dismantling the economic architecture Hamilton and Clay had built. So, to synthesize all this, the vision of Alexander Hamilton, fought for by Henry Clay and enacted by Abraham Lincoln, fundamentally transformed a vulnerable agrarian collection of former colonies into a global industrial behemoth. And it's just this incredible historical irony that the very mechanisms designed to protect infant American industries from foreign empires eventually became the developmental blueprint used by subsequent nations to challenge American economic supremacy.
And the really analytical point to take away here is that the tension between the agrarian ideal of free trade and the developmental state's drive for industrial sovereignty, it isn't just an artifact of the 19th century. It is the foundational blueprint of modern global economics, born right there in the smoke of Philadelphia docks and Capitol chambers.